Red Bull's upgraded F1 car has a big concept overhaul that has targeted its biggest weaknesses and has a curious feature that is legal for now. F1's development race is in a fascinating early phase after the first major updates were revealed at the most recent Grand Prix in Miami, including 3 of the top 4 teams, Red Bull, McLaren and Ferrari. And it immediately changed the pecking order, not just because McLaren properly fought Mercedes across the whole Miami weekend, but because Red Bull was suddenly right back in the mix. Prior to Miami, Red Bull drivers Max Verstappen and Isaac Hadjar routinely complained that the car was lacking aerodynamic load and even worse behaved differently lap to lap, let alone session to session. That made the RB22 a midfield car in China and Japan, but Verstappen was transformed in Miami where he was a genuine pole position contender and should have been in the podium fight in the Grand Prix but for a spin on the opening lap. Key to this was a front-to-back Red Bull overhaul that contained some classic Red Bull innovation. Striking visible changes like a large dive plane added to the front wing and the rotation of the new rear wing into an upside down position were the most immediately obvious at the time, but there was a lot of interesting aero detail in the heart of the car. A comprehensive floor and bodywork overhaul with revised bib geometry, a new sidepod inlet, an updated engine cover with a high-walled sidepod and a wide water slides meant a very clear shift in bodywork concept that sets the Red Bull completely apart visually from the other top teams. Ferrari and Mercedes have sidepod undercuts all the way along the car with a gentle downwash shape and the floor fully exposed beneath. McLaren's is closer to the new Red Bull design, featuring a sidepod that falls away from front to back, but McLaren's is one consistent shape, not as steep in its decline, and has a mostly flat top surface. The rear of the sidepod is also rounded off and joins the floor much more inboard, which is the key area of difference. The Red Bull sidepod design is not its most innovative part. Water slides were prominent on several cars in the ground effect era, and the shape of the new RB22 bears some resemblance to the 2022 Alpine as well as Red Bull's own work in 2024. But it's now been able to take everything a step further because of a clever exploitation at the rear of the sidepod, or technically the floor. McLaren boss Andrea Stella admits Red Bull has been quite smart and innovative, using what he calls legality concessions to introduce a unique shape on the car. This is a reference to a sharp fence at the rear corner of the sidepod where it meets the floor, rather than a smooth curved transition that's universal across other sidepod elements and designs. The Red Bull shape helps extend the outside of the sidepod further back, further outboard on the floor, which completes a clearly different overall design, the purpose of which we will explain a bit later in this video. But this shape is not something other teams thought possible. The geometry Stella refers to relates specifically to the shape of conventional sidepod designs where you typically see curves and smooth edges. F1 cars are split into reference volumes, or legality boxes, that impose different geometric demands on different sections. The front of the sidepod is governed by the sidepod inlet reference volume, but the back of the sidepod typically falls within the engine cover. The regulations normally force this sidepod bodywork to be smoothly curved and continuous, preventing teams from creating sharp fins, discontinuous edges, or multi-element structures, most likely because it's an area the FIA doesn't want to start sprouting many aerodynamic appendages on the grounds of safety, complexity, and unintended consequences. So these sidepod aerodynamic surfaces can't curve inwards, which means a concave radius less than 50mm, or curve outwards with a convex radius less than 75mm. But the area where Red Bull's sidepod meets the floor is part of the floor corner, where the rules do not enforce the same geometric limitation and parts can be made up of multiple sections. It had been theorised that where a part may straddle more than one reference volume, then the least restrictive demand would apply, and this is what gave Red Bull permission to create a shape that wouldn't be allowed anywhere else on the sidepod. But our understanding is the concession comes down to how the rules only define specific parts of car bodywork as aerodynamic surfaces. In F1 regulation terminology, these are the surfaces that remain in contact with the external airstream after all trim and combination operations have been completed and must be a rounded shape. Once you're past the technical jargon, that sounds simple enough. It suggests that any surface that comes into contact with airflow is an aerodynamic surface. And yet it's led to a scenario where part of the sidepod somehow isn't really considered part of the sidepod and also isn't considered an aerodynamic surface. In this case, Red Bull has split its design in such a way that the back of the sidepod is not actually part of the engine cover bodywork or the rules that restrict it. Instead, it counts as part of the floor corner with multiple sections that are joined together, and when two bodywork components are trimmed and combined together, the surfaces at the internal boundaries are no longer in contact with the external airstream. In other words, the sharp edge is not a surface, it's a joint between two sections being combined, and the FIA's agreed this falls outside the regulatory definition of an aerodynamic surface, so the minimum radius requirements do not apply.
Today's video is brought to you by the Overhaul Podium Series, a premium line of car cleaning, detailing and air freshening products made in collaboration between Overhaul and Oracle Red Bull Racing. Engineered with precision and expertise featuring SiO2-based hybrid ceramic technology, the Overhaul Podium Series products are formulated to meet the elite performance standards of Oracle Red Bull Racing, so you can achieve podium-worthy results on your vehicle at home. Fans of the race have had a chance to try the Overhaul Podium Series products on their cars, and they said the results are incredible. From the tyre shine to the interior detailer and spray wax, this line has everything you need to clean and detail your vehicle like the Oracle Red Bull Racing team. The Overhaul Podium Series is available now online and in store. Find out where to buy and more information at overhaulpodiumseries.com. The Overhaul Podium Series, the world's most elite car care.
Red Bull's design has been cleared by the FIA as a clever interpretation and is legal, but this doesn't mean the FIA is entirely happy with the idea. The FIA believes it goes against the intention of the regulations and will monitor subsequent developments in this area from Red Bull and any teams that try to replicate it. Then the FIA will assess whether its position and the wording of the rules need to be reviewed for 2027 and beyond. It's easy to imagine the rationale the FIA could use to justify closing down this design route. If part of the consequence ends up being that the design contributes to a more turbulent aerodynamic wake off the back of the car, making it harder to follow, the FIA will act on the grounds that preventing this remains a key objective of its rules. But it could also unilaterally decide that this is simply not where it wants teams to start bringing elaborate multi-surface sharp bodywork and shut it down. A key factor will be whether what Red Bull has done sparks a development war in this area in the pursuit of clear performance gains. That will ultimately come down to how much it works. Only Red Bull knows exactly where it fits into its new concept and what direct or indirect benefit it brings. But McLaren reckons every team will now be trying to figure this out. Stella says they will all be studying the Red Bull design to understand the advantages, and his comments carried the implication that it could become a big area of exploitation given it wasn't something previously thought possible. If rivals do think this brings a clear advantage, but requires a bigger conceptual change to actually implement, then replicating it might not be a quick job or even possible this season. Then the notion that this will open a can of worms that's more trouble than it's worth could easily be a narrative that gets pushed to help nudge the FIA towards outlawing the design longer term. While we can't know the exact role one single part of a Red Bull package plays in addressing its weaknesses, there are already theories for where it fits in and the broad objectives at play. The alignment of the back of the side pod where it meets the floor and the positioning of the floor edge slots do not appear to be coincidental. What Red Bull may be pursuing here is that the sharp edge creates a well-defined vortex at the outboard rear corner of the floor, the slotted floor edge feeds energised air inboard of that vortex, and together they form a barrier that separates clean, managed underfloor airflow from the dirty, turbulent wake coming off the rear tyre contact patch. Sealing the floor edge like this would stop disruptive airflow raising the pressure underneath the floor so it maximises downforce and makes it more robust, helping prevent potential stalls that trigger sudden losses of downforce too. Red Bull's car didn't produce the expected rear downforce in its first iteration. Hadjar described having to guess what you're going to get each time out, while Verstappen noted the car swung between understeer and oversteer extremes. This sapped the drivers of confidence and, together with a steering issue that hurt the feeling he had through the wheel, left Verstappen feeling like he couldn't attack any corner. So the changes in Miami aimed to better support the rear, with Red Bull's side pod bodywork and floor changes all about maintaining or improving downstream flow stability. And its new interpretation, or loophole, exploitation, or whatever it should be called, fits perfectly with a target of keeping the underfloor airflow more strongly separated from the floor edge at the back and therefore less prone to detachments in certain situations. This area of the car feeds off the back of the aggressive waterfall style side pod design and pulls airflow aggressively inward and downward towards the rear of the car, but also the side pod's higher outer wall may serve to keep turbulent airflow from the front wheel wake away from the cleaner flow that's being channeled internally. The intricacies of the Red Bull concept front to back extend well beyond individual shapes and functions, it's how it all fits together. That's why rivals end up studying each other's cars so forensically to try to reverse engineer what they've come up with, especially when it involves something being done in a way most haven't seen before.